Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and this is video number 2 featuring the Uphere 120mm tower cooler. The first one didn't go particularly well because, well, if you haven't watched it already, we'll put some links in the video description below. Make sure you watch it first and you'll get a really good idea. And also we'll go through the full unboxing process, which we won't be doing in this particular video. This is more of a follow-up. Essentially, the problem I had with the previous one was in some way in the manufacturing process, this base plate on the bottom was essentially loose, it was kind of hanging off, and also there was a real jagged edge to the actual flat plate. Now this is another version which I've ordered very recently, a couple of days ago. I've left it around about a month or so between ordering just to try and weed out any kind of issues they may have in the supply chain, and this is what we've received. So, is it going to be flat or is it going to be another monstrosity? Keep watching to find out more. So sorry about the long introduction there, let's get straight into it. So obviously, possibly you know what this is. If you don't, I'll quickly go over it. So this is an addressable RGB fan CPU cooler for AM4, AM3, Intel sockets, etc. Again, I'll put some listings below so you know what it actually fits. One of the nice things about this particular unit from Uphere is you've got some addressable RGB lighting accents on the top. So when it's actually mounted in your PC, kind of that way out, you'll be seeing some lighting on the side. So yeah, all very nice. But if it doesn't work particularly well, that is totally irrelevant. Then the only light show you'll be seeing is possibly fire coming from your CPU, which is generally deemed as being a bad thing. So the problem we had before, like I said, is this copper base plate wasn't particularly made well, and there was a lot of unevenness. Now, looking at this one straight away, it does look a lot flatter, which possibly you can't see particularly well from the camera angles, etc. But trust me, this one looks a heck of a lot better. The last one, you could visibly see the kind of peaks and troughs in the heat pipes. So let's get a flat surface and see what it's actually like. So putting it on the base plate there, immediately I can see there is daylight coming through. So I can kind of wobble that around. If I put it flat on one side, there's about a millimeter gap. And if I do it the other side, it's about 0.5 millimeter. So there's definitely some unevenness to the surface, which for most people, if you're installing this on a CPU and you put plenty of paste on there, you're very unlikely to actually notice it. One of the ways you can notice on your own CPU cooler, if you want to try this at home, is if you've got nails or basically just anything which has got a solid surface to it, you can basically scratch down the side. And you should find that your nail or whatever you're using doesn't actually get stuck. Now, I haven't got particularly long nails, as most of you know, but even so, it is getting stuck in between the heat pipes, which in itself isn't a bad thing. That is the whole reason that we use thermal interface compound to kind of fill in those minor imperfections. But ideally, they need to be minor imperfections, not ones which can be measured easily by eye, roughly around about 1 millimeter. So if this is not a good start, again, moving that on there, we can't actually get the ruler flat pretty much in any part of the cooler. So yeah, this is not a good start. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to send this one back as I did with the previous one. I'm going to actually see if we can make any improvements with this. So first thing I'm going to do is to install this into my own personal system. That's using a Ryzen 9 3900, and we'll just do some basic tests to see what the performance is like. After we've done that, I'm then going to use a whetstone, which is generally used for sharpening shears, that kind of thing. And we're going to try and get this as flat as we possibly can. Then we're going to do some retesting, see if it actually makes any difference at all, and then we'll report back with my final findings at the end of the video. So stay tuned. Okay, so we've done some testing and I've tried to rectify the cooler as best I could. So essentially what I've done, you're probably wondering why I've got my DeWalt sander out. Essentially what I've needed to do is with the heatsink base, with the pipes, etc., what I've had to do is get the sander on it. I started off with like a 60 grit and took most of the edging off to get it as flat as possible. I have been using my metal rule to try and work out the flat parts of the actual base plate itself. Normally, if you can, the idea is to get things as flat as physically possible, much like we've got with the Noctua cooler here, where the base is just completely flat. There is very few imperfections in that, so that is a really well finished cold plate. Unfortunately, the Uphere fan and cooler assembly, it just doesn't add up. It really doesn't. In theory, it should be very similar performance. We've got 5 heat pipes like the Noctua. It's a 120mm tower cooler. The mountings are essentially very, very similar, but for some reason it just could not keep the Ryzen 9 3900 in check. With our noctua cooler, we were getting at roughly, this is 100% fan speed on both, just to level out the playing field, and we ran a 10-minute loop of Cinebench R23. We got higher scores with the noctua, as you'd expect, about 200 points more on each run, and temperature-wise, there was a really big difference between them. With the noctua, we were kind of around about the 74, 75 degrees mark Celsius. This is in a roughly 23 degrees ambient room. But sadly, with Uphere cooler, we were getting kind of 84, 85 degrees. So yeah, about 10 degrees worse off, which is pretty awful if you bear in mind that the fan actually is about 400 RPMs faster. Yeah, it just it doesn't quite add up. There's definitely an issue with those exposed heat pipes just not making quite the right amount of contact with the CPU. It could be as well down to some of the limitations of the fan itself, not pushing enough air through, etc. But I did everything within my kind of abilities, so sanded down the cold plate, even got to the point where I got out some auto glim polish and actually got out with a microfiber and tried to polish it as best I could to get a semi-reflective surface. But even with all that done, a fresh application of paste, it just really couldn't do the job. So essentially, oops, they've done it again. Uphere have given me another fan, which essentially isn't finished to the levels that I would expect personally. Again, I've had some feedback from you guys from the previous video, you saying that your cold plate is absolutely fine, it's smooth as a baby's bum, all that kind of stuff. Mine genuinely wasn't, and I encourage you, if you've got one of these coolers, take it off and actually try it. Do the fingernail test, scrape it down through the pipes, see how even it is. Also, again, get yourself a flat edge or a known flat edge and put it just along the surface. Can you see any kind of light coming through? Is there any air gaps at certain points, any high spots, low spots, all that kind of stuff? Because I really was expecting better, but we do have to take into consideration that Uphere is actually quite inexpensive, around about 25, 30 pounds here in the UK. And obviously the noctua cooler is considerably more expensive, so you would expect a better finish and ultimately a better result, which is kind of what we've got. So in order to summarize what I would suggest doing, if you are looking to cool something like maybe Ryzen 5 3600, possibly even a 3700, then I think that is pretty much the sweet spot for the Uphere cooler. If you're looking to cool something a little bit more exotic, maybe a 3900, 3950, or one of the upper range in the 5000 series, I would certainly consider looking at your options, seeing what else on the market, such as the Arctic Freezer 34, that is always a good choice, and of course the noctua coolers are a fantastic option also. So I think that's going to pretty much wrap this one up. Sadly, it isn't the news I was hoping for. I was expecting for much better results, but again, you pay your money, you take your chances. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.